couple of days ago, I made a video about Cody Mock from North Dakota State, and it has since passed over 100,000 views, so thank you guys for that. In that video, I said he had the best story of any player in the 2023 NFL Draft, but the subject of today's video's story is almost just as good, and honestly, may even be a little bit more surprising. Darnell grew up in complete and utter poverty. His family was divided because his brother left them alone, his mom was working job to job, barely making ends meet, and then she even got in a coma, which left the boys all alone. Darnell, as difficult as a childhood as one could possibly have, but somehow, he went from complete and utter poverty to one of the best recruits in Las Vegas history, a 5-star player, and someone who's going to hear his name called in the first round of this year's draft. Today, we're to tell the inspiring and insane story of Darnell Washington. He's a 6'7" freak of nature who could soon terrorize NFL defenses and be a big deal for years to come. But before we get started, be sure to leave a like if you want to support today's video, subscribe if you are new to the channel, let me know what player, topic, team, or situation I can cover next, and turn on notifications so you never miss when I upload. Now, let's get started and talk about the rise of Darnell Washington. In order to understand how Darnell got to this point, we first got to go back in time and talk about his childhood. Darnell got dealt a ridiculously tough deck of cards. When he was a kid, his father would leave him, and he'd just be with his brother and his mother. His mother also had it extremely difficult, as she would get in multiple automobile accidents, one of which would knock her into a coma and put her in rehab in the hospital for 4 months. They were living in complete poverty at the time, and this took her away from her kids, put her out of work, and made it unbelievably difficult on them. His older brother was an extremely high-achieving kid in the classroom and a star receiver for Desert Pines High School, and Darnell would become one of the most prized recruits in Las Vegas history, a starting power forward on their basketball team, and he even won the shot put event for his state. Going back in time though a little bit more, the dad would end up leaving when they were 6 or 7 years old, and his older brother would teach him how to play football. His brother Ezekiel would serve as the coach, using YouTube to teach him footwork and technique, and the sport would provide temporary escape from their tough living conditions and the abandonment of their father. Darnell stepped on the gridiron for the first time at 9 years old, and apparently his dream was to become a star running back and eventually a quarterback. But neither of those two positions would end up being the answer for him. This ended up being super tough on him, as he said, quote, "When we failed, we never had help. We never had anyone that we could call and say, well, we need a place to stay, without us having to pay something that I didn't have or spending my food stamps." So, eventually the Washington family would bounce around from city to city, living for a few months where they could afford rent until they were subjected to eviction. The boys enrolled at several elementary and middle schools and relied on each other completely as they worked to make new friends. Because of that, he really never ended up making new friends, and that has to be really tough for a kid. Darnell said, quote, "I just kept it to myself. Me and my brother, we didn't really let anybody in. It just seemed that the family could never catch a break." As one of his family friends said, quote, "For Ezekiel and Darnell, it was a weekly conversation where they were going to live. If you've been batting against the same pitcher for years and can't get a hit, it has to feel impossible. Thankfully, I didn't have to go through this as a kid myself, and reading this just does make me sad, but it makes it even sweeter that they found a way to get to where they are now." One place in particular was so bad that it made her mom feel absolutely horrible. She said, "I didn't feel safe myself as a mother living there, but we had to live there because the rent was cheap. There were always babies being found in the dumpsters." That last quote is absolutely horrifying, and it would get even worse and tougher on the family as that car accident would happen, and now the kids were all alone, and they would go to the hospital to see her, enduring long days and having lonely bus rides. The visits would end up providing temporary relief, but at the end of the day, they'd have to find their own way and grow up quick. The kids never ended up missing school, but they did miss dozens of meals, as they often asked classmates for leftovers after lunch, and they'd have to practice on an empty stomach, and that made football a chore for them. Eventually, when we get back to the football scene, he was noticed right away. When his first high school coach saw Darnell, he was 6'4" at the end of his freshman year, but grew an inch or two each and every year since then. When he got to Desert Pines, their coach was intrigued that the two brothers walked in the door. They were delighted to see a couple of strangers trickle into the school's weight room, and granted they weren't invited, but they were happy they were there. The two definitely stood out. Darnell would eventually start to blossom on the football field as they were trying to unlock his immense potential. One moment in high school showed how crazy he was. His head coach said, quote, "It was against Arborview. We were playing a game and he was playing defensive tackle. He batted the ball with his right hand, popped it up in the air, and caught it with his left hand, and started running, and all the kids piled on him, and he pitched it to a teammate, and he scored a touchdown." It's a pretty insane story, and Darnell was poised to break out on the recruiting scene, and when he made his switch to tight end, that would ultimately help him become a 5-star prospect. He fit into the culture of the program, finally had a brotherhood, and a family on the field, and the scouts would find Darnell. He would receive his first offer from Arizona State, and his coach said, quote, "No one even knew who he was. He was just a big kid." Once they saw him playing and they saw his size, coaches were lining up. As he got more and more male, his brother had to look out for him, and they consistently turned to God. The two would pray together before each and every game, a reflection of the bond they had and how much faith they had in God. But the more I researched this family, the more respect I have for them, and it's just awesome that God was such a central part of their lives. Eventually, it seemed that one school in particular was where Darnell was going to go. That school was located in Athens, Georgia, and many projected that he would go there. But he had more football to play first. As a senior, Washington would end up catching 31 passes for 586 yards and 4 touchdowns. He also had 15 tackles, an interception, and helped them go 11-1 while reaching the 4A state semifinal. The guy was absolutely insane, but where was he going to go? We already kind of knew the answer, but out of 35 offers, he made the announcement during halftime of the Under Armour All-American game. He chose the Bulldogs over Alabama, Tennessee, Florida, and Miami. Why Georgia? He said, quote, "When I first got there, I had a feel. It's all about the feel and the coaches. It's what's best for me, my family, and everyone." It seemed he was pretty sold from the get-go, and he also kept his decision pretty low-key. He said, quote, "I didn't even tell my mom. She gets football, but she doesn't really know the whole process. I really only told my coach and one of the coaches that I sent a letter to and my future wife. That's pretty much it." Darnell stayed out of trouble, worked hard, and made something of himself, so now him and his family would get to reap the rewards of this, as according to 24/7 Sports, he was a 5-star recruit, the number 2 athlete, and the 23rd best player in the class of 2020. So, how would Darnell end up doing at Georgia? When Darnell ended up arriving at Georgia, many of the other players there assumed he was an offensive lineman. He'd have to correct them, but essentially, he looked like a 6th offensive lineman for Georgia. As a freshman in 2020, he'd be stuck behind Trey McKitty and ultimately finished with 7 catches for 166 yards. He said he came in a little bit too heavy and had to adjust to the speed of the SEC. He said, quote, "Coming in as a freshman, it's not easy. When I came in, it was a news flash from high school to college. It's a big jump." In 2021, the Bulldogs would have a ridiculous tight end room. They'd bring in a true freshman by the name of Brock Bowers, who no one really thought was going to be that great, and then you brought in 5-star prodigy transfer from LSU, Arik Gilbert. Combining those two with Washington, the Bulldogs had the most loaded tight end room in America, and it wasn't even close. In 2021, would unfortunately not be able to put together a full season. In his first 6 regular season games, he failed to catch more than 2 passes and didn't even register a single touchdown. His first score of the year would come in the SEC Championship against Alabama, and part of that was due to a foot injury that he had suffered. He ended up catching 1 pass in their national championship victory over the Tide later on, and many speculated that Darnell was going to leave. I mean, there was no reason for him to stay. Brock Bowers had emerged as a star, they had Oscar Delp coming in, and it seemed like he was falling behind. But that was not how Darnell operated. When asked if he ever thought about transferring, he said, quote, "Not really. I kind of don't think about that. I just think about coming here. If my role is to block, I'll block. I'm a role player." That's also a very refreshing soundbite to hear, as it seemed he was all about the people around him and just playing his role. In 2022, his numbers would become a little bit better, as he had a highlight level hurdle in their Week 1 victory over Oregon, had 3 catches for 64 yards against Missouri, and then caught his first pass in the regular season against Mississippi State. That ended up being the best game of his career, as he finished with 5 catches for 60 yards and a score. After the game, Stetson Bennett said, quote, "I didn't know it was his first touchdown because it makes no sense that it was his first touchdown. The dude is unbelievable, and he's a mismatch everywhere. He weighed whatever he weighed, but he's like 6'8" and can run like we run. You can't cover him with a DB, he's unbelievable." Washington would end up catching another touchdown a few weeks later against LSU, and then would help them beat both Ohio State and TCU to get another college football title. Darnell would finish the season with 28 catches for 454 yards and 2 touchdowns. After his 3rd year there, he would decide to declare for the 2023 NFL Draft, and right now, many scouts believe he's a 1st or 2nd round pick. This year's tight end class is pretty insane. You have guys like Dalton Kincaid and Sam Laporta, but right now, Darnell is probably the best of the 3 and has the most potential. One scout said, quote, "Washington has the size and blocking skills of an offensive tackle, but he moves with the prowess of a pass-catching tight end." As the tight end has become more important in the NFL, Darnell is somewhat of a cheat code. The guy can catch the ball, he can block, he can run, and more importantly, he's great for culture and great for leadership. Seems like he is the next can't-miss prospect at the tight end position, but many are probably skeptical because of his low numbers there. To be fair, Brock Bowers took most of the catches away from him, he dealt with injury, and he was more of a blocker, but definitely, franchises wish he had better numbers. At the Combine, though, he ended up checking in as a freak of nature. He clocked a 4.64 in the 40-yard dash, a 4.08 in the 20-yard shuttle, and finished with an athleticism score of 91, which was second amongst all tight ends. He put up insane numbers, and in some areas was the best tight end in Combine history. Washington is obviously a huge deal, and according to NFL Mock Draft database, he's currently ranked as the 34th overall prospect and has a 32.4% chance of getting taken in the first round. In my opinion, prospects ranked 20th through 40th are all sort of the same, and he could either find himself going in the late first round or the early to mid second round. It's just going to depend on which team wants to take a chance, and I think he's a guy worth banking on. The guy went through a ridiculously difficult childhood, has made something of himself, and has all the athletic tools and potential to be a star at the NFL level. I really enjoyed making today's video, and I hope you guys have more respect for him now. But what do you guys think? How do you think Darnell Washington will translate in the NFL? What do you think of Georgia football for 2023? And what player, team, topic, or situation can I cover next? Be sure to let me know down below. Leave a like if you want to support today's video, subscribe if you're new, and check out all my other videos on the end screen, including my video about the insane rise of Cody Mock. I hope to see you guys again soon, but until next time, peace.